Have you ever witnessed a moment so raw and beautiful that it restored your faith in humanity? That's exactly what happened at Café Lumière last Friday night. If this story touches your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more real-life stories that remind us of the power of human connection. Sarah sat nervously at the corner table, her fingers fidgeting with the small notepad she always carried. The café buzzed with evening chatter, the warm lighting casting a gentle glow across her face. She tucked a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear and glanced at her watch for the 5th time. Her blind date was already 15 minutes late. The accident that took her voice happened 3 years ago. A car crash that left her physically unharmed except for the damage to her vocal cords. The doctors called it psychogenic aphonia, partly physical, partly psychological trauma. Whatever the medical term, the result was the same: Sarah hadn't spoken a word since. When her date finally arrived, Sarah's heart sank. Marcus was handsome, yes, but the annoyance on his face was evident before he even sat down. "You must be Sarah," he said, not bothering to hide his disappointment as he gave her a once-over. Sarah nodded and smiled, then reached for her notepad to write a greeting. "What's that for?" Marcus asked, frowning as she began to write. Sarah quickly scribbled, "I can't speak. I lost my voice in an accident. I communicate through writing." The change in Marcus's expression was immediate and devastating. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered, not even trying to lower his voice. "Jen didn't mention anything about this. I don't have time for..." He trailed off, already reaching for his jacket. "Look, I'm sure you're nice and all, but this isn't what I signed up for. I want a normal conversation with someone, you know?" Sarah's cheeks burned with humiliation as Marcus stood up. "Sorry," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "This just isn't going to work." He walked out without looking back, leaving Sarah alone at the table, fighting back tears as several nearby diners pretended not to notice what had happened. At the table next to hers, Michael Wilson had witnessed everything while trying to keep his 6-year-old daughter Emma entertained with crayons and a coloring book. A widower for 2 years now, Michael recognized the look of rejection and isolation on Sarah's face all too well. "Daddy," Emma whispered, tugging at his sleeve. "That lady looks sad. Like how you look sometimes when you think I'm sleeping." Michael smiled sadly at his daughter's perceptiveness. "Yes, sweetheart. I think someone was unkind to her." Emma's brow furrowed with the serious concentration only children can muster. "You always tell me to be kind when people are sad." Michael looked at his daughter, then at the woman who was now gathering her things, clearly intending to leave. Something in her dignified composure despite her obvious pain struck him deeply. "You're right, Emma. Wait here for just a minute, okay?" Sarah was just putting on her coat when she noticed someone approaching her table. She looked up to see a tall man with kind eyes and slightly messy brown hair standing there, holding a napkin with something written on it. He placed the napkin on her table. In blue crayon, it read, "Would you like to join us for dessert? They have great chocolate cake. No talking required." Sarah looked past him to see a little girl waving enthusiastically from a nearby table. Despite her embarrassment and hurt, Sarah couldn't help but smile. She hesitated, then nodded. Michael introduced himself and Emma as Sarah joined their table. Emma immediately showed Sarah her collection of crayons and offered to share. "Daddy says I'm the best drawer in my whole class," she announced proudly. "Can I draw you a picture?" Sarah nodded, her eyes already lighter than they had been moments before. "My daddy doesn't talk much either sometimes," Emma continued, selecting a purple crayon with great deliberation. "He says that's okay because listening is important too." Michael looked slightly embarrassed. "Kids have no filter," he explained. "But she's not wrong. After my wife passed away, there were days when words felt impossible." Sarah reached for her notepad, then paused. Instead, she picked up one of Emma's crayons and wrote on a clean napkin, "Thank you for this. You didn't have to be kind, but you were. Everyone deserves kindness, Michael replied simply. Especially after dealing with jerks like that guy. The evening that had started so disastrously transformed into something unexpected. Emma chattered enough for all three of them, while Michael and Sarah exchanged notes and smiles. There was an ease between them that Sarah hadn't felt with anyone in a long time, the comfort of being accepted exactly as she was. As the cafe began to close, Michael hesitated before asking, "Would you like to exchange numbers? Maybe we could meet again sometime. Emma's been asking to visit the aquarium, and, well, it's always nice to have company." Sarah wrote her number on a napkin, adding beneath it, "I'd like that very much." That first meeting at Café Lumière marked the beginning of a slow, gentle courtship. Michael never pressured Sarah to explain her muteness, and Sarah found herself relaxing in his patient company. Emma became Sarah's enthusiastic champion, proudly telling her kindergarten classmates about her new friend who talks with her hands and her heart. 3 months into their friendship, Sarah invited Michael and Emma to her apartment for dinner. Her home revealed much about her that words couldn't: photographs of her hiking in distant mountains, bookshelves overflowing with well-loved novels, and a piano in the corner that gathered dust. "You play?" Michael asked, noticing her glance toward the instrument. Sarah shook her head, then wrote, "I used to. Before." That evening, after Emma had fallen asleep on Sarah's couch, Michael gently asked about the accident. For the first time, Sarah shared her full story through written words. The crash that had taken not just her voice but her confidence. The fiancé who had waited 6 months before deciding a silent partner wasn't what he wanted in life. The family who tried to understand but couldn't hide their frustration at her condition. "The doctors say I could speak again," she wrote. "There's no permanent physical damage. But every time I try, it's like there's a wall I can't break through." Michael read her words carefully. "Some walls aren't meant to be broken," he said quietly. "Sometimes they just need a door." The following week, Michael invited Sarah to his home for the first time. After dinner, while Emma was showing Sarah her bedroom with all the solemnity of a royal tour, Michael slipped away. When they returned to the living room, Sarah stopped in surprise. Michael was sitting at a piano she hadn't noticed before. "It was my wife's," he explained. "I haven't played since she died, but music was our language. Sometimes when words fail, music speaks." He began to play something gentle and questioning. Sarah stood frozen, memories washing over her, years of lessons, recitals, the joy she'd once found in music before silence had become her only song. Michael looked up at her, his fingers still moving across the keys. "You don't need to speak to be heard, Sarah." Something shifted inside her that evening. Not a dramatic breakthrough, but a small crack in the wall she'd built around herself. She began to join Michael at the piano, their hands sharing the keys in duets that required no words. 6 months into their relationship, Sarah started seeing a new speech therapist, one who specialized in trauma-related mutism. The progress was painfully slow, but for the first time in years, Sarah felt hope rather than pressure when she tried to form sounds. Emma became an unexpected source of healing. Children, with their unfiltered acceptance, sometimes accomplish what professionals cannot. Emma never treated Sarah's silence as a deficit. Instead, she adapted with the natural flexibility of childhood, creating games where communication happened through gestures, drawings, and expressions. "Daddy and I are learning sign language," Emma announced one day, proudly demonstrating the signs she'd learned. "Teacher says it's another way to talk with our hands." Sarah found herself learning alongside them, her hands forming words that her voice couldn't yet speak. The three of them developed their own hybrid language, part sign, part written, part the intuitive understanding that grows between people who truly see each other. The first sound Sarah made was a laugh. It happened during a picnic at the park, when Emma's ice cream cone tipped over and landed perfectly upright in the grass. The sound burst from her unexpectedly, rusty and brief, but unmistakably a laugh. Emma and Michael stared at her in delighted surprise, and Sarah covered her mouth in shock. "Do it again," Emma encouraged, but Sarah shook her head, suddenly overwhelmed. Michael gently placed his hand over hers. "One step at a time," he said. That was beautiful. Progress came in small moments after that. A whispered "thank you" when Michael brought her tea. A soft "good night" to Emma during a sleepover. Each sound was an effort, each word a victory they celebrated together. On the one-year anniversary of their meeting at Café Lumière, Michael took Sarah back to the same table where they'd first connected. Emma was spending the night with her grandparents, and Michael seemed uncharacteristically nervous. "I have something for you," he said, sliding a small wrapped package across the table. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a pendant shaped like a musical note. Sarah looked up at him questioningly. "Turn it over," Michael said softly. Engraved on the back were the words, "Your voice has always been heard." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as Michael continued, "I fell in love with you long before I ever heard you speak. I fell in love with your kindness, your resilience, your way of listening not just with your ears but with your whole heart." He took her hands in his. "I know we haven't known each other that long, and there's no rush for an answer. But Emma and I talked about it, and we both want you to be part of our family. Officially." Sarah's heart pounded as Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Sarah Mitchell, will you marry us? Not because you're speaking more now, but because we love exactly who you are, voice or no voice." Sarah took a deep breath, focusing on the feeling of air filling her lungs, the way her speech therapist had taught her. The words came out raspy and soft, but clear, "Yes. I will." Their wedding 6 months later was small and intimate. Emma served as both flower girl and best daughter, as she insisted on being called. Sarah's vows were delivered partly in her still recovering voice and partly in sign language, with Michael signing his responses in return, a symbolic acknowledgement that they would always communicate in whatever way worked, that love transcended conventional expression. 3 years after that disastrous blind date, Sarah stood in front of a room of speech therapy students, sharing her story. Her voice was stronger now, though she still occasionally struggled with certain sounds or fell silent when overwhelmed. Michael and Emma sat in the front row, Emma now 9 years old and fiercely proud of her stepmom. "Losing my voice taught me who would truly listen," Sarah told the students. "And finding Michael and Emma taught me that being heard has little to do with making sound." After her presentation, a young woman approached her. "I have a patient who hasn't spoken in 2 years after a trauma," the student explained. "What would you tell her if you could?" Sarah thought for a moment. "I'd tell her that healing isn't linear. That silence doesn't make her broken. And that the right people will hear her heart even when her voice is missing." As they left the university that day, Michael took Sarah's hand. "You know what Emma said to me this morning? She said she can't remember what it was like before you came to our table that night." Sarah smiled. "Sometimes I can't either." "Remember that guy who walked out on you?" Michael asked. Sarah nodded, the memory no longer painful. "I've always wanted to thank him," Michael said with a grin. "Best favor anyone ever did for me." Sarah laughed, a full, uninhibited sound that still felt like a miracle every time. "Me too," she said. "Me too." That night, as they tucked Emma into bed, she asked for a song as she always did. Michael began to play the guitar while Sarah sang softly, her voice gentle but unwavering, finding strength in the love that surrounded her. Sometimes the most profound connections begin in moments of rejection. Sometimes our greatest wounds lead us to our deepest healing. And sometimes, when words fail, the heart speaks a language all its own. If this story touched you, please remember to like and subscribe for more content that celebrates the unexpected ways we find connection and healing in this complicated world. Remember that everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about, and a simple act of kindness, like approaching a stranger's table with a crayon-written note, might just change someone's life forever.